This is our final lesson of the first term, and today we're going to learn about the past continuous or past progressive tense. At the end of this lesson, you're going to use the past continuous to express two actions in progression in the past. Also, you're going to talk about recent and parallel activities in the past using while. But first, in order to use this grammar tense in the correct form, you need to understand what is the use. When do we use it? We use the past continuous tense to express actions in progression in the past. For example, I was watching TV this afternoon. So this is an action that took place in the past and lasted a few minutes, a few hours. It lasted some time. What is the grammar structure of this tense? You need the subject, you need the verb to be in simple past, was or were, you need the main verb with the ending ing, and a complement. Remember that we use was when the subject is I or the third person, he, she, or it, and were is used when the subject is you, we, or they. Example, I was working in the garden all day. This is an action that took place in the past and it lasted some time. Something that you need to keep in mind is when you put the verb with ing. There are some important spelling rules that you need to follow. The first one is when the verb ends in e. When it happens, you need to drop the e and then add ing. You see, for example, believe. Believe ends in E. So the E disappears and then you add ing. Believe, believing. Here we have other examples. Have, having. Live, living. Take, taking. Move, moving. When you have a verb that only has one syllable and you see that this syllable has this combination, consonant, vowel, and consonant, the last consonant must be doubled, and then you have to add ing. So in the first one, you have the word sit, and you can see that there is a vowel between two consonants. In this case, the letter T is doubled, and then you add ing. Sit, sitting. Other examples are get, getting, plan, planning, run, running, stop, stopping. This rule also applies when you have a verb that has two or more syllables, but what is the condition? That the stress is in the last syllable. Remember that the stress is understood as the acento in Spanish. Begin. Begin has the stress in the last syllable. And you can see that in this case, the last consonant is doubled, so you have a double N. So you have begin, beginning. Other examples are forget, forgetting, regret, regretting, admit, admitting, upset, upsetting. And the final rule that you need to remember is when you have a verb and this verb ends in I and E. In this case, those letters must be replaced by Y and then you add ing. For example, die, dying, lie, lying, tie, tying. Here we have a few examples, but in this case we discriminate affirmative, negative, and question. Remember the grammar structure of the affirmative form in the past continuous. Subject, the verb to be in simple past, the main verb with the ending ing and a complement. He was riding bicycle. In this case, we have to use was because remember that he is the third person, and that's why we have to use was. Negative. We use the same grammar pattern, but the difference is that we use the simple past tense of the verb to be in negative. Example, we weren't paying attention. We use weren't because the subject is we. And when you have a question, basically you have to switch the order of the words in the sentence. In this case, first is the verb to be in simple past, the subject, and the main verb with ing. But when you want to make a more complex questions, remember that we have WH words. WH words like where, what, why, which, etc. In this case, so first the WH word, then the verb to be in the simple past, subject, and the main verb with the ending ing. Where were you going? I was going home, for example. Okay, important aspects to be considered. You need to identify what action verbs are versus non-action verbs. But what are they? So, action verbs are those verbs that you can visualize, that you can see. Is when you see someone doing something. Example, you have run, touch, say. You could say, yesterday I saw my best friend running around the neighborhood. So this is an action that can be visualized, and that's why it's an action verb. But what about no action verbs? So those verbs are the ones that you cannot visualize. Yes. So some examples you have are be, want, cost, like, love, and hate. When you have a no action verb, so you cannot use the past progressive or present progressive. You have to use the simple tense. It's incorrect to say Jane was being at my house when you arrived. This is not correct because this is a no action verb. In this case, you have to use a simple form. In this case, we have Jane was at my house when you arrived. So this is the correct form. The second one, Charlie is loving that hamburger. That is incorrect. This is a no action verb because it's something that you cannot visualize. So in that case, Charlie's loves that hamburger. That is the correct form of this verb because it's a no state verb. Sometimes you can have two sentences in one. This is a compound sentence. In this case, when you are using while in Spanish means mientras. So you're talking about two parallel actions. They were studying while he was making dinner. Two actions were happening at the same time. And in that case, both sentences must be in past progressive because you're using the word while, mientras. Two actions were happening at the same time. But sometimes you can combine the past progressive and the simple past. And when you have the word when, it represents that an action is interrupted. Here we have an example. I was watching TV. This is an action that was happening in the past. But this action can be interrupted by another action. I was watching TV when she called. Yo estaba viendo televisión cuando ella llamó. So the fact that a person called interrupted the action I was doing. I was watching TV. So at that moment, I stopped doing what I was doing and then I had to answer the phone. Okay, once you have understood what is the correct use of the past progressive and the grammar patterns you need to follow in order to express ideas in the correct way with this grammar tense, it's important to remember some useful vocabulary. And this vocabulary is related to crimes. If you see in some activities you have to do in Canvas, those activities are related to crime. And it is important to be familiar with those words. So here on this slide we have some words and the definitions of those words. And in front of those definitions you have some images. What is the idea? That you read the word, the definition, and figure out what the correct image is according to this. To commit a crime, to do something wrong or illegal. So what is the correct one? The correct image, the image that represents to commit a crime. The first one, the second one, or the third one. So you can see that is the second one, to do something wrong or illegal. Next one, guilt, or to be guilty. It means to be judged, accused of doing something wrong or illegal. So according to the image, what is that one? So you can see that is the first one. And obviously the last one is the last image. To convict. To convict. Officially decide someone is guilty of a crime is when a person goes to jail. Okay, here we have more words. And where you're going to do the same exercise to match images to words and definitions. The first one, alibi. What is alibi? Evidence that the individual was somewhere else when the crime happened. According to those images, what do you consider is the image that must be matched to this word and definition? So if you see, you can see that is the last image. To murder, a person killed by someone else. So you can see that is the first one. And the last one, to steal. To take someone's property without permission. Obviously, is the only one that is missing. We have more words. Witness, a person who sees an event. So you can see that in the last image we have a person who is looking at something through the window. Next one, dead body, a person's or animal's body that's dead. So you can see that is the first image. And the last word, theft, a person who steals. Obviously is the guy who is not showing his face. Okay. Now let's change some words that are also important. When talking about the past, we can also talk about inventions. So we have vacuum cleaner, dishwasher, nylon stockings, washing machine, Tipex, Biro, diapers, bulletproof vest, and windscreen wipers. And here we have those inventions because we have a lot of inventions in the world and some inventions that we have in the present, and thanks to those inventions our lives are easier. But let's figure out about the inventions that were made by women. So what do you think are those inventions that were made by women? So this is something you can discuss with a person about that. If you investigate, so you can see that the dishwasher was invented by a woman, as well as the windscreen wipers, the Tipex, the diapers, and bulletproof vest. That is an invitation for you to investigate about those people, about those women who invented this and why they invented those elements. We have more inventions. We have helicopter, contact lenses, condom, flushing toilet, and the vending machine that is very common in our times. But here we are not talking about inventions that were made by women or men. Those are just inventions that are very necessary in our times. But just talking about our first question, who invented? So what was invented by a woman? So if you're going to express an opinion and the idea is to sound more natural, so we can use linking words like besides, which means además, in addition, adicionalmente, not only but, no solo pero. And when we combine those elements, so we can express an opinion. For example, talking about the first question, What is the invention you think that a woman invented? Example, I think women invented nylon stocking because they wore them. Besides, I believe they also invented a vacuum cleaner because it is useful for them to clean the house. So in this case, we're providing an opinion, but we're using some linking words in order to sound more natural. Also, when we're having a conversation, we can have those expressions in order to sound more natural and more spontaneous. Could you tell me? I like to know. Could I ask? And here we have more expressions. I'm pretty good, thanks. I'm fine, thanks. Not much. Nothing interesting. In a conversation, we can combine those elements. And here we have an example. Hey, how are you doing today? I'm pretty good. Or I'm fine, thanks. How was your day yesterday? Or what were you doing yesterday? Not much. Nothing interesting. It was nice. In the morning, I was cleaning while my sister was cooking. I was working or studying all the evening. At noon, I was eating while my family was watching television. So we can combine both tenses grammar, so the past progressive versus the simple past, and in order to sound more natural, more spontaneous, we can use some expressions in order to make our speech more fluent. Okay, now let's talk about reading strategies. And when reading, it's important to apply some techniques. Every time we face an exam, something that we need to be worried about is about the time. And also, we get worried about that because when we are given our answers, we sometimes we don't manage the time wisely, and that's why we have to read very quickly and probably our answers are not the correct ones. In order to avoid that situation, we can apply some reading strategies, and basically we're going to focus on scanning and skimming. But before that, it's important to have a previewing, so a global vision of our lecture. But what is that? When you're previewing is when you get familiar with pictures, titles, and instructions before reading the text and what steps you have to follow. First, read the title. Second, read headings. Third, explore pictures. Fourth, find names and dates or numbers or some important information you consider that will be necessary. 5. Identify the type of text. It is a poster, it is an article, it is a poem. What is this? And finally, it's important to understand the instruction. When you understand the instruction, you know how to face a question in order to answer accurately. But why? Because it helps predict the topic of the text. You can see connections and understand what to do with it. Okay, now let's talk about the skimming. And skimming is a reading strategy that is about getting the general idea of the text. So, what do? So, you read the first lines of the paragraphs to get the general idea. How? As I said before, you read the first sentences of each paragraph. You don't need to read everything, especially when you have words that you don't understand. It's not necessary that you understand every single word because if you read the sentence and if you understand the topic, probably if you don't understand a word, by the context you can infer the meaning of the word. And by doing that, you can figure out the main idea by making connections and deductions. Why is it important to apply those techniques or this technique? Is because you can get a general idea about the topic and then you can confirm your predictions. Because remember that first you had an exploration of the text just by reading the title, exploring images, and focus your attention on important details or not important details, important important keywords. Scanning. Scanning has to do with details. And what is that? This is when you look through a text quickly without reading to find specific information. So you don't read very concentrated and you don't have to understand everything. Basically what you have to do is to read very quickly a text. And in order to do that, so when you see the question, you focus your attention on keywords in order to find specific information in the text. As I said before, it's not necessary to read every single word, and every single word must be understood. It's not necessary. And you stop scanning when you find what you want. So when you read a question, identify keywords and then read the text quickly and stop on important information. That is the part that you're going to read carefully in order to know what you need to focus on. And why is it important? Because it helps find a very specific piece of information and it saves time. Time is important, and sometimes you feel worried, you feel the pressure of the time, and that's why you cannot be concentrated. But when you focus your attention on important details and apply strategies in a very accurate way, so you can get better results. I have an example. This is a text about skimming and scanning, and we're going to do that. First, we need to do a previewing. In the previewing, you have to see the title, the important words. You can see that there are some words that are in bold, like read a text very quickly, scanning, skimming. You can see a picture where you can see a man who is reading the newspaper. And if we continue, so we have some bullets where you have maybe specific information. So you need to focus on that, okay? That is the previewing. But when you're going to skim is when you're going to read the first line of each sentence. So let's do the exercise. We're going to read just the first line of each paragraph, sorry. When you're reading, you don't have to read everything. Sometimes you need to be able to read a text very quickly. And for example, to look up the word valuable in the dictionary, you would then start with the letter A and read every word. This is called scanning through the dictionary. Skimming is another type of fast reading. Skimming and scanning are both quick reading techniques, but they have different purposes. And here we have just some important items, but you don't need to read everything. But in order to get the general idea of this text, basically this is an article that is aimed to provide some strategies in order to have a successful performance when you're taking a reading test. Now, scanning. Scanning is when you're going to focus your attention on important details. And for example, if you have a question that is related to skimming, for example, so you need to read very quickly the text and just focus your attention on the important thing. So in that case, you have to see the text very quickly and then stop on the important thing. So imagine that the question is, what, according to the passage, what is the reader going to learn about skimming? So in that case, you see very quickly the test, so you start. When you're reading the test, blah, 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 so you start reading quickly, but then you can see in paragraph number 4 that you have the word skimming. So that is the part that you're going to read very carefully. Skimming is another type of fast reading. You might use skimming to look through a text quickly to get the gist, the general idea. So if you want to know what is going on in the news, you might skim through a newspaper or a news website. You wouldn't have much detail, but you would find the main points. So here you can see that skimming is a technique in order to get the general idea. Um, and and by just applying those techniques, so you only have to focus on the important details, You're going to take advantage of the time, and for sure, you're going to get better results if you apply those techniques appropriately. Just do the exercise, yes, just apply those techniques and you can see the results. Thank you for your attention. Just remember that in Canvas you have some important information, you have some important resources. It's important to practice, to read carefully, to study before doing the exercises. Remember that for the first module we have 3 activities, and the deadline of these activities is tomorrow at 23:55. So it is important to do those exercises and to do those activities on time in order to avoid any complications, because the day after tomorrow we're going to start with the second term, and so far I think that we are going to continue in a virtual way. If you need some extra help, don't hesitate to contact me. And if you need a tutorial face to face, just write to me and we can arrange that meeting. Thank you very much for your attention, and don't hesitate to contact me in case you need it.